Joining us today is Brandon Mitchell. Thank you for coming in. And he's fresh back from the front in Donbass in Ukraine. So, how on earth did you end up there? Why would anyone go into a war zone?
It seemed like a good thing to do at the time.
Okay, you say at the time, suggesting that perspective has changed.
Well, no. When the war started, there was quite a hysteria all over the world, on the news, in the social medias.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite compelled, Lindy, seeing pictures of Kyiv being bombed, children running. What I was really compelled by, seeing on the media a little girl, they were filming her. What are you doing? Oh, I'm taking these bottles and Daddy fills them with petrol, and then we stick this cloth in here, and that was a real heartbreaker for me.
Right.
I specifically remember that maybe first couple of days of the war, watching from home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a real emotional draw for me.
Okay, but I'm sure there must be millions of people who saw civilians, including little girls, making petrol bombs and knowing that the civilians were being bombed and that there was an invasion. But they didn't answer the call. They may have felt something ought to be done, but why should you have done it?
Well, I hate to say this, but I've come to accept in life I'm not like most people.
Right.
Everybody wants to be unique, but when I don't, for a lot of years, I try to do the right thing as best I can. One of my previous employers, we started a union in the workplace because there was a lot of workplace abuse. But out of 50 people who complained all the time, there was only 2 of us who actually did the work to try to improve the work conditions for our fellow employees.
Okay, so you see you're someone with a history of stepping up.
Well, yeah, I'm a recovering addict. I'm in a 12-step program, and I've never been an angel my whole life.
Right.
But more often than not, what I found, if you'll humour me, a lot of my addiction was to do with pain, and my conscious. I really suffer when I do the bad things, which drives me down a spiral. Drove me down a spiral to medicate. But more often than not in life, when I try to do the right thing, I can live with myself. Whether it be the union at work, whether it be, when you offer somebody help, like an old lady to cross the road, or help someone with their bags, but there's a social awkwardness to offering your help to a stranger.
Right.
I try to deal with that.
Okay, so you're someone with, you think, a stronger than normal moral compass, or a moral compulsion, perhaps is a better way of putting it.
Just what I can live with. But when I do bad things, I don't do the right thing when I have the opportunity, I regret it.
So possibly you're motivated to step up because more than other people, you get punished when you don't do what you see as the right thing.
With my own self-esteem, yes, and I have to live in my own head, don't I?
As do we all. And now you're sitting here in your uniform, and
Yes.
you're very clearly labelled. So what have we got here?
Hospitalieri,
Yep.
Hospitallers Medical Battalion, and which is a part of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, UDA.
Right.
Yeah, I've been a member of our battalion since after my second week in Ukraine. So we're going on 14 months now almost 14 months I've been a member of Hospitallers.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's principally a medical unit, but you weren't actually trained as a medic before going out.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was a young boy. I was fascinated with the army. I grew up in Canada, and I joined the Army Reserve, and I quit school and joined the army. I'm 37. There's been a lot of change.
That's very old to quit school.
I quit school actually when I was 17.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, good to keep me on point. No, but I joined the army at an age where you could still join without a high school education. That's something that's changed.
Right.
We have standards now.
Spoil sports.
Yeah, spoil sport. No, but I joined the army. I joined the Army Reserve, the army, as an infantry soldier in Canada. But I'd never been on a combat tour. I'd never been to Afghanistan. I'd never been to Iraq.
Right.
That led me to come to England with the army. We got to work with all these armies around the world. The British Army. I was fascinated. Do you know those books like Andy McNabb?
Oh yes,
Yeah,
Bravo to Zero. Oh,
Whether
yeah,
it's
I read
true
that.
or not, it's fantastic. I read them all. The one that got away. I read. Yeah. You know the one, the Kiwi one. I read him. Mark, what's his name? I loved all that stuff, and when I met a Royal Marine, colour sergeant, and a Black Watch captain coming over to observe this new weird and wonderful kit, and I'm just a gate soldier, and they got chatting to me. I was like, oh, I would love to join the British Army. Well, yes, Corporal Ambrose is from Montreal. I was like, really? Yeah, the captain was from South Africa. I'd never been out of Canada in my life. How does this work? And I came to join the British Army, and within a year I spectacularly messed up my career on drink and drugs.
Oh.
Yeah, fantastic. 4 years in the army, and then I was a civilian and never thought about it until the war.
So they kicked you out?
No, they begged me to stay.
Oh.
Yeah. People, at the time, they said 600 people a year who would fail the CDT, the compulsory drug test, would be kicked out of the army. But a Canadian boy who tested positive for just marijuana, which was 15, 20 years ago, the attitudes towards marijuana were a lot different than they are now, even in society in general. I was asked to stay, but I had a lot of self-pity at the time. Like, I let everybody down, and I spiraled into a mindset that I'd let everyone down, I let myself down, and I got out of the army on my own. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so what happens next?
The weird and wonderful world of show business.
Oh ho!
Yeah. I knew some people who did these things called events, called shows. What's that? A man from New Zealand by the name of Big Wave Dave. He would have all these trade stands at, like, the London Ideal Home Show.
Right.
You know, they would be demonstrators selling the Miracle Chamois. The microfiber mops were a big thing back then. Microfiber was new, you remember? Clean your windows. My favourite one was the slicer, the Borner slicer from Germany.
What can that do?
It chips, it chops, slices, it dices. You get the big blade for big chips and small blade.
For small chips?
Yeah, you know how it goes.
How?
And I did all that work. I did it all over England. Caravan shows, home shows, motor shows. Even at Olympia back in the day, there was the sex show as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah. No, I'd done them all. The car shows, motorbike shows was my favourite. Game fairs. But I got good at that work, and it's long, hard work. But I was able to travel all over the world. Australia, New Zealand. See, during the London Ideal Home Show, when I started that job, fresh out of the army, I was a £50 a day man, a schlep. There were people like from America, there were people from South Africa, all working at the Ideal Home Show for 28 days, hungover or not, for the big prize. But through that, for some years, I used that to travel all over the world to work as a demonstrator.
And loving it?
Sometimes loving it. When I was making money, but it wasn't a Monday to Friday, and I never wanted to do that in my life. But if I was willing to work hard, I could work more than 40 hours in 3 days of the week, but the other 4 were for me. It made sense.
Okay.
It made sense.
So you saw the world.
Yeah, I've seen the world. I loved it. Yeah.
Okay, so keep doing that then.
Keep doing that till the drugs and alcohol crashed. I found myself in Australia in a really bad state. But I found a 12-step program.
Right.
Basically, it all gone to pot. I had the money. I had a beautiful girlfriend, and I thought I was something. You know, you don't know who I think I am.
Well, tell us.
Well, I thought I was something. I don't know. I don't know what I thought I was.
Well, you've got a beautiful girlfriend and lots of money, and you're travelling the world. That's some people's definition of something.
But then I lost all the money, and I made an arse of myself and lost the girl.
Oh.
And then I wasn't what I thought I was. So
Right.
yeah, I went down a really dark path. But my father had been in a 12-step fellowship years ago, so I knew that people could quit drinking, quit doing drugs, and have a better life. So I went to a lunch meeting in Melbourne, in Richmond, in Melbourne. You know, people sitting around the circle. You know, and I was late for the meeting. This big man with tattoos everywhere around him, wearing a singlet top. Australia's quite hot, you know.
Known for it.
A bit more than here in England. And he just, welcome. And I sat in and I listened. And after the meeting, they said, come for a coffee. Come for a coffee. What are you doing tonight? Do you want to come to another meeting? And I went to another meeting. And they said, do you want to come to one tomorrow? The next day, you see a pattern formed here. And you know, little by little, my relations with my family got better. I went to university for a while as well, for a couple of years. And then I ended up self-employed in the same industry that I was always in, working for myself and employing other people. Yeah, I learned to deal with my emotions, and I guess, like my grandmother would say, you're all growing up now.
Okay, so you've got yourself on an even
I grew
keel.
up. Yeah.
And where did you end up? Did you drift back to Britain?
Yeah, I spent many years here. I had a fantastic life. I lived in Bournemouth for 8 years.
Oh, right.
Absolutely love Bournemouth. It's like, it's the south, but they're friendly like northerners.
Ah.
You know, random conversations, because so many people moved to Bournemouth, Glaswegians, Scousers, people from Yorkshire, people from London. It was a friendly town. I did my work. I was away most weekends. I mean, I could be from Belfast to Glasgow to NEC in Birmingham. That's the biggest exhibition centre in Europe. That was a big part of my life. But during the week I was in Bournemouth, do my meetings, and I got involved in amateur boxing. That was my biggest joy in my life, in Bournemouth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been punched in the head quite a lot then.
Yeah. Well, my father, not to dwell on it too much, but he owned a very large boxing gym in Toronto in Canada, and I knew boxers growing up, and I watched the fights my whole life. But my father went to jail for some time, and the boxing gym was no more. He was a bit involved in the organised crime.
Oh, okay. Wow,
Yeah,
that was...
yeah. Interesting life.
Wasn't expecting that. Okay.
No. But as an adult, you know, through a 12-step program, I kind of learned I had to be my own father in life.
Right.
Not so many expectations on others. I found myself chasing a lot of passions, like in my late 20s, 30s, like things that I wanted to do as a kid. Yeah, I became an unlicensed boxer, fighting around, met wonderful people. West Indians, the gypsy community, a lot of Polish friends as well.
Right.
And we were training and sparring, and pretty humbling, we'll say, having an 18-year-old boy give you a bloody nose and you can't do anything about it.
Right, and so none of these people are really in it for the money then?
Passion.
Yeah,
Passion.
you say it's unlicensed boxing, so it's not big money.
No. I mean, I used to have to sell tickets, like to a fight in Yeovil or something. Like Yeovil's a small little yokel town. Don't tell them that. But yeah, I would go do all these things, different places, train once, twice a day. Life was going great. I had a girlfriend in Sweden. We were doing the long distance thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Well, aren't all relationships in the beginning?
Well, shorter distance relationships are better still, though, aren't they?
Oh, well, she was Swedish, and I like Sweden, and she seemed to like me.
Okay.
Yeah, but we would see each other at least once a month, every 6 weeks, travel back and forth. I had money back then, you know. But when Corona happened, I was in the events industry. That kind of took a sharp turn.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There was no Zoom equivalent of
No.
that then.
No.
So you're effectively jobless then. Is it that bad?
I was more or less bankrupt because the events industry runs on deposits
Right.
for events throughout the year. So as you do more events, and I acquired more money over the years, I could pay more deposits further in advance for big and important events. I think the last refund that I got was 14 months later, well into Corona. Some folded. No, I moved to Sweden. We always talked about it. I was scared to move to Sweden, you know, to restart as an adult, learn a new language, be a bus wanker.
Okay. But she was very pretty, so...
Yeah, she was very pretty. She still is, as a matter of fact.
Sorry, I shouldn't have used the past tense. Very rude of me. Sorry if you're watching.
Maybe she is. You can edit that though, hopefully. Anyway, I moved to Sweden. First time in my life I had a real job that wasn't the army or self-employed. And I packed boxes for a living, my first job, for an online company. And I didn't like that.
No, it's not as glamorous as your previous life.
No, but I did quite like. There's nothing like working class humor. You know, you make your own fun at the poorer paid jobs. I could never work in an office. We packed frames, posters and frames.
Right.
And one of the biggest joys while I was going to collect frames, and maybe another lad would walk by, say. Tommy, he was from England, from Ellesmere Port. He was ex-Navy, right character. I would love walking by him, and I'd love to hit him with a frame right in the bollocks.
Hilarious.
I know, right? No. But seriously, you have to make your own fun in those workplaces,
Right.
you know. So I studied Swedish. I became a stoneworker. I built all the display kitchens in all the IKEAs around Sweden. I've worked in the most northern IKEA in the world, in Haparanda, Sweden.
Well, there we go. Now we have a title for this video. The man who worked in the most northern branch of IKEA.
And I ate meatballs there too, in case you're wondering.
Okay. And did you steal the little pencils?
No, I wouldn't do that, Lindy.
No,
I'm not like you.
No, because that would be wrong. Okay. Right. Okay. So we need to get from IKEA to Donbass.
To Donbass.
So you're watching the telly one day, are you?
When the war started, I was horrified. You know, watching the news every day, Russian tanks, they're rolling in, they're going to crush Kyiv. What was it they said? They'll crush Kyiv in 3 days. I remember that. That's what they said. I became obsessed with Ukraine. I became absolutely obsessed. I worked with Estonian people. See, Estonians work with stone. So they were doing all the kitchens. It was an Estonian company. I've been to Estonia, borders Russia, you know. I started thinking about my friends. I started thinking about all my Polish friends in England from the boxing community. You know, maybe after Ukraine's done, they'll go for Poland. I felt like a real an obsession, a compulsion. On day 3 of the war, Mr. Zelensky, he's quite charming. I still think he's quite charming if you watch him on camera. He asked for foreign volunteers to come help in Ukraine, to help with the fight, and I found that really compelling. I was fixated on that. You know, like what am I going to do? I didn't sleep all night. I couldn't sleep all night. I was thinking about, I've got to go to Ukraine. I've got to go to Ukraine. What will I do in Ukraine? I don't know what I'll do in Ukraine, but I've got to go. And the next day, I went to work. I didn't tell anybody what was going on in my head. I didn't tell my girlfriend. I told my dog. I didn't tell my colleagues, any of my friends or family. But as the days went on, the compulsion grew inside of me. And it was like a feeling like inside of my stomach, like a sickness. And Zelensky asked for volunteers on day 3. About 5 days later, I called my auntie. She's like my mum. My mum died after I was born, right? So she's my closest family member.
Okay.
And I called her, and I bawled my eyes out. I don't cry very often, and I just told her, I said, I'm going to Ukraine, and I hope you're proud of me. I hope you love me. I hope you understand like what a great life I've had, and if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be who I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she had a little tear up too. But after I had that conversation with my auntie, I didn't have any fear. I had zero fear of whatever would come. You know, like the only thing I can relate it to, it's a friend of mine who's gay.
Mm-hmm.
When he was talking about his story, how he came out of the closet to his mother. You know what I mean? Like, this is my mother. You know what I mean? My auntie Jennifer. Like, I could tell one friend, one, two, but once I tell her I'm going to Ukraine, it's real. And I relate that to his story, because like once he told his mother that this is his life, there was no going back. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? That's the only thing I can relate it to. Like, she's the closest thing I have in my life.
Well, I suppose fear has a function of stopping you and making you think, should I really be doing this dangerous thing? And perhaps stopping you from doing something foolish. And so you feel the fear when you're not decided yet, but once you're absolutely decided, the fear serves no function and perhaps fades.
I'd accepted it.
Right.
But how do I get to Ukraine now? This is quite a thing. There was a talk, I had no social media. You know, I'd become quite bitter to the world of narcissism and 1, 2, 3, look at me, Instagrams, all these things. I had no Facebook, no Instagram, none of that TikTok bollocks.
Right.
They were saying, contact the embassies. You know, so I says, okay, the Ukrainian embassy. I live in Sweden, in Stockholm, and I called them, and they said, yeah, we're too busy, and our website's been hacked. The websites were all down, the Ukrainian government ones, but we have a Facebook page. Go on Facebook. I was like, God, I don't have Facebook. I got a friend to go on his Facebook to find the details. I contacted an email address. You know, this is going in, I don't know, day 12 of the war or something. And the next day, I get a phone call from some random man named Mr. Martin or something. And I was like, hello? He says, yeah, what is your military background? He wanted to know. And I said, well, I was in the army years ago. I've never been to combat, and I just want to go help any way I can. He said, right. I'm going to put you in a Signal chat group. I said, what Signal? He says, oh, well, it's like WhatsApp, but it's better.
Yes, that would have meant nothing to me either.
No, you didn't know what Signal was either, did you?
No.
We were in a chat group with, I think there was about 100, maybe 150 people in Sweden in this chat group. And they were all talking about, we're going to go to Ukraine. Yeah, we're going to go to Ukraine. When are you going to go? Oh, I'm going to go next month. Oh, well, I'll go in 2 weeks. Oh, well, I'll go in 2 months. I'll go in 3 months. And I thought, these people are never going to go. There was one man I got chatting to in the group, and I said, do you want to have a phone conversation? So this was after a couple of days of this chat group going nowhere. Right. And we had a video call. I never met him. He'd never met me. He just quit the police force to go to Ukraine. And I said, well, he sounds pretty serious. Do you know what I mean? That's quite a serious thing. Quit being a copper. I said, these people are never going to go. Why don't we go? He said, well, yeah, me and 2 other guys are going, and there might be another guy joining us. I said, well, when are you going to go? Well, we're thinking about the 12th of March. We'll fly to Krakow. I said, well, I've got a few things to sort out with my job and my home life and my dog. My dog weighed heavily on my mind. I said, I'll meet you on the 14th in Krakow. How does that sound? So then I got to ring my boss, and I got to tell them I need to leave for a family emergency, and I don't know when I'll be back.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't tell them I was going to Ukraine. And I just thought that nobody would take me serious. Do you know? Because a lot of people were saying, I'm going to Ukraine, I'm going to Ukraine. And probably a lot of people in the pub talked themselves up they were going to Ukraine. And they probably had to stay out of the pub for 2-3 weeks.
Oh, I remember Big Mac, when he was going out, he had the impression that about 1,000 people from Bristol alone were going.
Right. So, you know, you understand. But I broke down and I told... I included a few of I wanted to play my cards right at work. I included my boss, the HR, and the underboss in an email. And I said, yeah, the truth is, I'm actually going to Ukraine. And they replied to me. I was so surprised. They said, yeah, we suspected you were, and this actually makes us very happy. And see, I work for an Estonian company in Sweden, and like you know what Estonia borders. So
Oh, yes.
yeah, there was 30 Ukrainians that work in our factory. Half of them stayed, half of them went home to help in some capacity. I
Right.
never met any of them again. I don't know what become of them. My employer said, "What do you need? What do you need from us?" And I said, "Well, I've never taken a day holiday in my life. I would kindly like all my holiday pay. Our pay is a month in the rear, the way we're paid. I would kindly like all my pay and all my holiday pay. And if you could kindly not fire me and leave me on the books as an employee, I'll see you when the war ends."
Right.
They gave me everything. I had about, probably the equivalent of about $7,000, like in holiday pay, back pay, everything. They gave it all to me within 2 days.
Okay, so you've broken it to your dog, your gran, lots of strangers online, and your work colleagues and your boss. I noticed that your girlfriend hasn't featured in this yet.
Yeah, well, it was pretty scary to tell her, because I was wondering what the reaction would be. We're two very different people. Very, very, very different people. She's got a lot of fine qualities. But when I did tell her, when I started getting my ducks lined in a row, her first reaction is, well, what about me? Now I'll have to take care of Masa, our dog, all by myself. And I suppose that's very valid, but to me that seemed kind of like when people are dying in mass in Europe, like one of our neighbouring countries, well, not far off,
Right.
That wouldn't have been my first concern.
Yeah, seems a bit tertiary.
Well, not in your world, you know what I mean? If your whole world is to go to work every day and go to the supermarket and come home and watch your favourite TV show and everything's great, and watch Eurovision, but that's her reality, and this was my reality. But in the end, she supported me, and what a big factor that was. One of the Swedes I was going with did an interview on SVT, the national news, and it's almost as if to her that it became acceptable that Brandon wasn't crazy, that there were this ex-police officer, this man of stature, who quits the police, that maybe this was an acceptable, normal thing to do.
Okay, so she needed, if you like, a role model, an example.
I don't know what the hell she needed, but that seemed to be a moment like that. She was like, because Swedes do that a lot. Yeah, and that seemed to be a turning point. And I think I had her on board to a certain degree, in principle, supporting me. So then it was pretty much, it was time to go. My employer, everything had been sorted.
So did you take much kit with you, or did you expect to get everything when you were over there?
I had a vision in my head. What would World War III be like?
Right.
That all of Ukraine was under siege. There would be no electricity. Water would be an issue. For some reason, I was thinking Falklands War. I was really thinking Falklands War. I was thinking real British Army tabbing mentality, that I've got to have the biggest Bergen in the world, and I got to live out of that Bergen for 1 month, 2 months, 6 months.
Okay.
what a waste of money and time that was. I had everything. I had a water filter system that one of my friends bought for me that was like 200 euros. Oh yeah, you just put the water in, like Bombay ditch water. Just put it in there, pop it in, but there you go, spring water. I've never used it. I don't have the heart to throw it out, and I'm too mean to give it away.
Oh.
It's in mint condition. Maybe I can sell it on eBay or something after the war.
Yeah. Well-travelled, been to the front.
Never been used.
Yeah.
Only been dropped once.
Signed by you.
Signed by me. Now, I didn't need any of that stuff. I didn't have armor plates, but I bought a plate carrier, a chest rig, Bergen. Didn't have any stuff like this, because I didn't know whether we'd get it from the army or anyone. I didn't know. But when I got to Krakow, I remember flying to Krakow. What an amazing thing, because everybody loved Ukraine, and I had this big army pack in the airport in Stockholm, and there was a big long queue. You know what I mean? Like, they love their queues even more than English people. They're very
Surely
orderly.
not.
That's a bold statement. No. I thought I'd be cheeky, and I'd say, excuse me, do you mind if I go to the front there? I'm on my way to Ukraine. And then someone's like, oh, why, yes, this is a normal passenger, Yes, sir. And this man who was in the queue took me and just started leading me. He was even bolder than me. He's going to Ukraine. And I'm like, well, that's a bit more like it, isn't it? But I got to Krakow. In the airport, I started noticing all these guys dressed like this.
Right.
Big packs. A lot of them looked like, like Americans. Like how, I don't know how an American looks, but when you see one. And Corona was still a thing, and they're like, "Oh, do you have your Corona pass?" I said, "Geez, I don't have a Corona travel pass. I'm going to Ukraine." And the Polish girl who stamps the passports just looks at me like, on you go. Yeah.
Why didn't you say stamp?
Yeah. With like the other 300 guys in the airport looking like they're ready loaded for bear.
Right.
I got to the hotel. I met up with the Swedish boys. They were very experienced. Like when I say I left the army a long time ago, I coulda, woulda. No one's interested in something you didn't do. I have no combat experience. I didn't count myself as a soldier, like some of them would say. Some of these guys were fresh out of the army, like within the past 2 years. They'd had advanced training, advanced medical training. Swedish Marines and Swedish Rangers are quite high caliber trained soldiers. I said, well, how am I going to fit in with this lot? And I had something that they didn't have. I had a contact on the other side. This was.
All right. I thought you were going to say, I know how a blender works, but no, okay.
Damn you, Lindy. I'm glad it's with an interview with you, because you don't take me so serious. And
all right.
From a friend of a friend who knew a friend, there was this old, crusty Canadian corporal who was like 60, ex-Canadian Army. He'd maybe been to Germany back in the day, but not way back in the day, if you know what I mean. He had a house in Lviv, or like some sort of safe house.
Right.
And through a friend of a friend, I met him and talked to him on the phone. He said, you can come, I can pick you up at the border. I said, well, that sounds all right. But while we're waiting in Krakow, I get another phone call from a friend of a friend. One guy that I was in training with in Catterick, here at ITC Catterick, the British Army camp. Right. He said, my mate Des is coming. I was like, who's Des? Oh, you like him? He's ex-1 para. He used to be on the counter-terror squad. He's living in Toronto now. He's a builder, but he's in Glasgow visiting his family, and he's on his way to Krakow. And I said, well, 1 para, those guys are pretty badass. Maybe I should wait for Des for a day. Arrived on the 14th, gonna leave on the 15th, and then I say to the Swedes, maybe we can wait till the 16th, because this guy's, those guys are pretty good. 1 para, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Cherry berries.
I never heard them call that.
That's what the Marines call them.
Yeah, they don't like each other.
I've noticed this.
Yeah,
yes.
they don't like each other. So we're waiting for him. He showed up at my hotel. So we're all going to wait. We're going to go the next day with this guy. I stayed up waiting for him. He shows up as drunk as I've ever seen a Scotsman. With
That be, I'm going to guess, fairly drunk then.
on Irish levels, yeah, it's up there. It's
Okay.
up there. He had himself a bottle of duty free, but and that was half gone. But I think he'd been consuming on the plane as well.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking, is this really the best state of, I'm trying to be the most responsible, as prepared as I can for all eventualities, and he sat down with me for about an hour and talked, and I'm gonna do this and that, and I think, thank God we got Des on the team. Well, probably one of the scariest things in my life, because World War III's in my mind.
Right.
Maybe about an hour after I fall asleep, all the lights come on, and then Des comes up to me. "I've got to go, mate. I need to go now. I'm going to go get a gun." And I was like, "Des, what are you going to do? You just tipped, I see a bottle of whiskey knocked over on the ground. He's a drunk Scotsman." And Des disappeared into the night in Krakow. But we've got to go the next day to Ukraine. So I ended up getting in a taxi to the border all to myself the next day, quite concerned about Des. He's not answering his phone. The Swedes are going to stay another day because they're going to wait for more Swedes to come.
Okay.
And so I've got to go on my own. And I didn't want to go on my own because...
Well, you don't want to go on your own, do you?
No, I don't. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we got an hour out. We got about an hour down the road, and it was like an Uber, Bolt sort of thing,
Right.
taxi. I get a phone call from Des. And he's like, "Hey, mate, how are you? You all right? Oh." And I was like, Des, how are you? Where are you? I'm thinking, God, he's in Krakow. You know what I mean? I'll have to go all the way back. And he's like, "No, I'm in Pretzel Town, Przemysl, whatever, in Poland." And I get Google out, and I was like, Jesus, that's on the way. Do you know what I mean? I says, "Des, how did you get there?" He's like, "I went to meet a lad. He's got Ukrainian family there, and he said he had some guns for me, but I went there and he didn't speak English and I didn't speak whatever he speaks, and it was just kind of awkward. I'm not got a gun." And I was like, I kind of had faith in him, because I thought, this drunken Scotsman who'd probably consumed about 1.5 liters of spirits after a long flight and all this, he'd managed to get himself towards the border and not out of the way. I said, God, I think we might have cracked it here. Imagine what he can do sober. Or maybe not. We picked up Des on the way, and when we get to the border town, I think it was called Medica at the time, it was a big tent city. Okay, and there was marquees everywhere, like a festival, and it was kind of like you could drive into Ukraine. There was the buses more coming out than going in, and then there was I want to say there was a sign like the footpath, Ukraine this way. And I was like, okay, all right, and everybody's got a tent there, from the mobile phone service providers, giving refugees free SIM cards. There was the Hare Krishnas, there was the Mormons, there was the Pentecost, the Jehovah's, the Jews. Everyone was giving out free food, free coffee,
Right.
and we were the guys going east, and there wasn't so many. And then I want to say he looks like Anderson Cooper from CNN or his lookalike. He starts coming up, "Are you going into Ukraine?" And I was like, "Yes. Do you want to do an interview?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to do an interview." At that border, there's fences everywhere. There's fences, and you could see women and children and dogs and cat carriers and people crying, and then we're going in. And I thought it'd be like, "Welcome to Ukraine," but it wasn't. I guess borders are the same everywhere you go in the world. Sometimes you give someone a bit of power. Those girls working the border, they weren't letting us in. There was, I don't know, some sort of thing. They wanted to search all our things. Do you have guns? Do you have this and that? We're like, no, we've come to help. And I think they held us for an hour. And I don't know why, but do you ever listen to, oh God, who does that song, The Clash or the Sex Pistols? Should I stay or should I go now?
Oh yeah, that one, yes.
Yeah, I just started singing that impulsively. And Des gave me a tap in the ribs. He says, do you not realise how insensitive is that, mate? All these refugees walking by you. And I was like, God, Brandon, you can be a bit of daft and unsensitive sometimes. I said, oh yeah, you're right, Des. And I think we waited about 2 hours, 3 hours, and then just suddenly they just decided we'd waited long enough, and they're like, you, Davai, stamp a passport. There we are. Canadian man picks us up. He picks us up with this, so he's got to be pushing 60.
Right.
And there's got to be another Canadian guy who was quite nasal. You know the accent. I'm from Canada. You know those type of people.
Okay.
And Des is hungover and I'm tired. That's not really what you need to hear. He had to be pushing 70 or a very poorly aged 60. He was coming to fight Russians. And I was like, what? But they were in the same regiment in the Canadian Army. So me and Des are in the back, and I'm just listening to them. And this old man is saying, yeah, I'm gonna go kill Russians. I'm gonna shoot a tow missile at them. And I was thinking, do we still use those tow missiles? I mean, I think that was 20, 30 years ago. I said to him, you know, what do I know? I'm a young spring chicken. I think they've got these things called javelins now that they're using. I'm no expert, but and he said, oh, I wouldn't know how to use that. And so anyway, what have I got myself into? We drove to Lviv. When I got to Lviv, I was shocked. Lviv was beautiful. Stunning city. People were driving left, right, center, everywhere. There were people on the streets. There were children. It wasn't a war. No, it wasn't a war at all. Paul, the man from Canada, he had a safe house where a lot of foreign fighters, NGO, like humanitarian volunteers would come through, and it used to be like a beauty salon. You know, get your nails done, get your hair done.
Right.
You know. And you drive down into the basement. Well, it was like a basement structure where the business was, and it had a sign on the outside. So obviously the beauty parlor had gone out of business, but the sign was in English. So his safe house, it was called The Secret Place.
Perfect. Double bluff. They'll never think of that.
No. But it's so The Secret Place. And then there's a territorial army barracks right beside it, and then there's like a Lundis to the left of it. But down in the basement, I was like, I sense the irony. I go in, me and Des, and right away I'm tripping over people. There's 4 rooms. There's about 40, 50 guys in there with, you know, the army bergens, the backpacks. They've got everything, and it's like, you know, it's getting towards night, and I'm like, oh, sorry, mate, sorry, you know, I don't want to be Chumley Warner, and, you know, I want to respect everyone's space, but try to find myself a space. There was 4 rooms, about 50 guys in there, and 1 toilet.
Ah.
Yeah, and it's a basement, so the ventilation wasn't the best. So I thought to myself, this is my life.
For a bit.
For a bit.
So you volunteered to take part in this action.
Yes.
And you've volunteered into a bit of a void.
Yeah.
You don't know. Some people are saying, it's all be over by Christmas. This will be a long protracted war.
Yeah.
This might go nuclear. There's a huge amount of unknown. So at this point, you don't know what unit you're going to be fighting for, what role you'll have, who your colleagues will be, whether you'll need to speak Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And is that perhaps the worst thing, the ignorance rather than what you do know?
My biggest fear was, what am I going to do?
The invasion of Ukraine has been hotly debated in the world press for some while now, and that's not going to change anytime soon, is it? And it's possible that some people are caught in a sort of bubble. You know, they've decided that one side is in the right and the other side is in the wrong, or something simple like that, and that any information that comes from outside their particular bubble must be suspect or wrong or pernicious. And there are, unfortunately, some people who have taken this attitude with me and these videos. And I know that I've lost subscribers over these Ukraine interviews. When I found out that someone I knew was doing something quite extraordinary, which I had never seriously considered doing, which was to volunteer to fight for another nation, I thought, wow, that's an interesting story. That would make a terrific video, and I should give this man an opportunity to tell his story. So I did, and I used a very non-adversarial interview style. I, with a smile, interviewed him, took him at his word, and just let him ramble on and let him tell us his story, which I thought was the right way to go about things, to get the best out of my interviewee. But I know that I have lost some subscribers over it. What we need, I suppose, is some way to get out of this bubble. I find myself, for instance, on YouTube in this bubble. I'm trying to get a genuine fair feel for how good is the latest Indiana Jones film, for instance. Is it rubbish or is it any good? Should I go to see it? Because Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my favourite films, but oh boy, I haven't liked the others in this series, but maybe I should give this one a chance. Well, I saw one absolutely terrible review, and then YouTube immediately filled my screen with lots more bad reviews. Because YouTube got the impression that I'm the sort of viewer who likes bad reviews of that film. So here are a load more, but are there good reviews? I don't know. It's very difficult to know what's out there when you're caught in a bubble. And with news, which is more important, let's face it, than film reviews, we really need to do something. Well, one thing you can do is go to not a news source, not a company that produces news, but instead one that just collates news from lots of other companies and then presents them all. Here you go. Here's the total picture. It's saying of all the news outlets, and this is what they're all saying. And have fun with it. But we can give you a little bit of help. For instance, you may like to know that all these ones are right-leaning and all these ones are left-leaning, whereas these ones are what we consider to be centrist, and so maybe that will explain the difference in how the same stories are spun. One of them, for instance, is called Ground News. It's only been going since 2018. Here we are. So you'll notice that we've got interesting over here. So what I've done is I've looked up one article about a reasonably common current Ukraine-related news item, which is the alleged meeting between Putin and the head of the Wagner group, who either rebelled against or mutinied or trying to stage a coup. Who knows really what was going on? Nobody really knows. So there's the news item, and here you notice you can see that it was covered by 278 different news outlets, and this many were right-leaning in the opinions of not just of Ground News, in the opinion of various other bodies that assess newspapers. And other news outlets. So some are left-leaning, some are right-leaning, some are centrist. And if you want a breakdown of that, you can look at that and look at all the various news outlets and see maybe that there's a strange blind spot. Maybe the news item is being covered by one side, but not the other. So that in itself is information, isn't it? Which sets things in context. And then you might want to delve a little deeper and look into the ownership of those various news sources. Perhaps it's a state-sponsored news outlet, and that's likely to introduce bias, isn't it? Or perhaps it's owned by one particular wealthy individual. Or whatever. You can look it up and you can dive into and get a bit more detail should you so wish. And then how factually accurate is this likely to be? Now, Ground News is not a fact-checking service. All it does is it looks at other fact-checking services and looks at how they rate various news sources, and if they all agree that a news source, even though it may be right-leaning, is at least factual, then it's probably factual, so it gets a high rating. So there's high, mixed, and low. And it's interesting to notice that the broadsheets in Britain, the broadsheets, The Guardian, which is sort of a bit left-leaning, and The Telegraph, which is a bit right-leaning, both have a mixed reputation for factual accuracy. That's not impressive. That's not good. Should be doing better, both of you. Anyway. So you get all those sort of details to go on. So now you can start forming a picture in your mind that is perhaps a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more comprehensive. And you may feel that you might actually get a better grasp on a topic. And it's interesting when you start looking at the actual individual articles. By the way, at the top there is a summary of all the various articles written by an artificial intelligence. So given, it shouldn't be that biased, should it, given that it's based on lots and lots of articles written by lots and lots of people. So that should sort of iron the bias out. But that's an interesting use of artificial intelligence, isn't it? How useful will that prove? I don't know, but it's an interesting use of it. Anyway, underneath it, you've got the various articles themselves. And I'm fascinated to see just how often the headlines and text are suspiciously similar or even word for word identical. You see the same news items being just reprinted by lots and lots of sources. Yeah, that's fine. We trust that. Boom, it just goes out there. It's not actually produced by them. It's been syndicated. So you can search for different news items. You can put in various filters. One of the most useful ones is it behind a paywall? And you can look at how the left is looking at it, how the right is looking. Oh yeah, by the way, the left and right. Look over here. You notice that on the right wing, things are in red, and on the left wing things are in blue. That's because, let's go up to the top, I had it in American things, so let's change that and make it British or international or just anywhere else other than the USA, frankly. And there you go, now it's the right way round. Now, everyone around the world associates the colour red with socialism. You know, we keep the red flag flying here. Even the Americans used to say better dead than red, didn't they? And yet, according to Wikipedia, this association of red with the Republican, which is sort of meant to be the right wing, although frankly, the Republicans and the Democrats are both further to the right than almost any party in any other civilized nation, but never mind. Just only in 2000 did they start associating red with the Republicans, which I find quite bizarre. Anyway, the USA, sort yourselves out, get it right, and the dates as well, day, month, year. It's very simple. Anyway, so you can choose to follow a topic on the site, and hang on, wait a minute. I'm giving you a suspiciously large amount of detail, aren't I, about one particular website? Am I? Am I a biased source, do you think? Who owns me? Well, actually, I'm being paid. I am a paid lackey of Ground News. Another way of putting it is that Ground News has very generously sponsored me to tell you about it. It's a service which you can find in a link in the description, in a link appearing on your screen. Also, it should be in the top pinned comment. And if you want to have a look at the site and look at all its features and give it a go for a while, well, you can by using the links there I've just mentioned, and you'll get 30% off if you go to it that way. And so, yeah, Ground News, it's one possible way that we could become more rounded consumers of news, and perhaps, in the future, debates on various topics could become just that little bit more civilized. Wouldn't that be nice?
I thought to myself, I'm going to come to Ukraine, but I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell the truth about everything I can do and everything I don't know. Right. So I'm around all these guys, most of them were British. There was a couple Finns living in this house. Mm-hmm. Ex-army, yeah, I've been to Iraq, Afghanistan. What were you? Oh, I was a dragoon. I was in the rifles. I was in the whatever. And I said, oh, that's not me. You know what I mean? I could never, I'm not good enough to be with these guys. I'll probably get them killed because I change a magazine 2 seconds slower than they do. This was going on in my head. Mm-hmm. The Swedes had come the next day. Because apparently the Swedes they were waiting for, they were making plans about plans, and they were going to set up a staging camp in Poland. So the Swedish guys I came with said, yeah, we're coming to Lviv. We were all waiting there for days. We had nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. We didn't know. We knew some guys that were at the secret place who had been to Kyiv. And like, what's it like in Kyiv? Oh, it's mental, mate. It's all going on there. It's going off. There's drones flying over, and this is blowing up. And I'm like, okay, but at the same time, what did I sign up for? A few days later, right away, it had occurred to me that there might be some people there not telling the truth about Kyiv or their backgrounds before they ever come to Ukraine. But I didn't know who was who. So what I thought I would do, the man who hosted the house, Paul, he was doing humanitarian things. Like he had a couple of vans that would bring food and supplies different places. And I thought, well, maybe that would be a good thing for me so I won't get in the way of the soldiers, you know. My Swedish friends that I come with and I quite like and I trust, they made contact with a man through Instagram to come join Hospitalos. And I was like, what's that? Oh, it's a combat medical battalion. I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. Yeah, we're going to go do that. And I said, well, I would like to do that, but I'm not sure if I'd be a burden or not, because I don't have all these super underwater knife fighter Chuck Norris skills, basically.
Right.
You know Chuck, right?
Oh, intimately, and they're vital for certain infiltration, but not really as a medic. For bandaging someone up, knife fighting skills.
Well, I didn't know these things, but
Right.
what happened, I had a chance to do a humanitarian convoy through the guy who was hosting us. And where it was to go to Kharkiv. Okay, so this is the beginning of the war, and Lviv's here, and Kharkiv's like over by Russia.
Yeah.
And I thought about it. Nobody wanted to do it. A couple people wanted to do it, and I said, I'd like to do that. And someone's like, what do you mean? You know, like that's crazy. You know, you don't have maps, you don't have intel, you don't. I said, well, apparently there's been a guy, like heard from a guy, he went there, and you don't go the normal way, or that's Russian, you're dead. But if you go all the way down south and you come, it's about a 60-hour drive. You'll 35 hours, 60, 70 hours round trip. You'll get there. And I said to myself, I have to do that. And the reason I had to do that, because that, in my mind, that was as farthest as in the country. It doesn't get any further than Kharkiv. But if I can do that and it works out good and we live and we don't die, that would be a good idea. You know, like then mentally I could do anything in Ukraine if I could just get over that hurdle. So that's why I chose to go to Kharkiv.
Right, you actually picked a big hurdle to start off with.
Yeah.
But why didn't you join the International Brigade? Isn't that the most obvious thing for someone who's not Ukrainian to do?
Well, we heard a lot of rumors about them, and we heard a lot of bad things. About the day before I left Sweden to go to Poland, to go to Ukraine, there was a town called Lviv, and in Lviv, apparently the Russians dropped some missiles, and I think like 50 foreigners died. You know, Americans, British, all sorts, and obviously untold amounts of Ukrainians. Okay. In one of our signal chat groups from Sweden, there was one guy who was actually in Lviv, and he was giving like muddled information, like I ran away from the camp that night after the explosion. We were all separated, but I came back the next morning, and then I was being arrested for desertion. That's what he said. I said, well, that doesn't sound very nice. When I was in Lviv with all these guys, they were like these super commando guys at the secret place. They were talking about the Georgian Legion. I'd never heard of the Georgian Legion, or I didn't know who was who. Right. And they said they were going there and they were giving them one magazine per rifle, you know, and some of them were saying, yeah, I've been to Iraq, Afghanistan. I don't mind dying for a good cause, but this is bullshit. And I was like, well, yeah, that's fair enough. But again, I didn't know what was true or not. But from what I seen of this Legion, I thought maybe, what do I have to offer there? That was the main figure. What do I have to offer? Because I'm not one of these special forces guys. Like everybody there was special forces. Do you know what I mean? All these guys, or they'd been in a special unit, particularly the Americans. But I bought into all of that. Like, well, that's not me, you know. So what could I contribute? So that's why I didn't want to join the Legion. I didn't want to let anyone down. You know, it was I thought maybe humanitarian, and I'll see where it goes. That was one of the most haphazard experiences of my life.
From the picture you paint, I get the impression that it was pretty haphazard for everyone, really.
Well, the problem, I understand the military very well as a principle that we're not a democracy, and we have a leader and we have a structure. But when you're dealing with a purely civilian context, more personalities come into play. So we had a convoy of one van and a car, which seemed to serve no purpose, this car, because it had nothing in it but people, and to go all the way to Kharkiv with a van full of used clothing that I would never want, diapers, and I think dried pasta. So this was a van half loaded full of this, and we're to go somewhere outside of Kharkiv, and it seemed very bizarre to me at the time. Like, I didn't have armored plates. Somebody loaned me a set, but even driving around Lviv, they were wearing armored plates, they were wearing helmets, and they were getting photos of themselves, like selfie photos, in armor plates and helmets, and it seemed to me really bizarre because nothing was happening. We didn't get to go to Kharkiv. It was somewhere outside of Kharkiv, and someone told us that there were civilians trying to get out of Kharkiv. The boys in the van, me, another Canadian, a Frenchman, we said, yeah, we would like to go do that. But the people in the car said, you can't do that. You know, you're not legally insured. And I said, not legally insured? I don't think that would be a concern in a war. So it was a big dilemma. I became really disheartened with them. I found out all they wanted to do. They just wanted to get pictures outside of this hospital in this town in their armor, giving out these things. And I didn't like these. I didn't understand that you have to provide pictures, you know, to get funding and things at the time. But
Okay.
it seemed very much like, look at how great we were.
Yes.
On the way back, there was a bit of an awkwardness between us all. There was this Canadian man who drove in the car who knew everything. You know, he'd been helping Ukraine since 2016, and he brought us. He had a credit card for some NGO. I don't know what the name of it was, and he took us all to a very fancy restaurant. And I was like, I didn't think there'd be a fancy restaurant so far east in Ukraine. And I think he probably spent about $150 on food, which is a lot of money in Ukraine, and congratulating everyone on what a job we did. But delivering like used clothing and dried pasta, and it was very, very awkward. When we left and started heading back towards Lviv, there's a town called Poltava we had to go through.
Right.
And what happened, I decided I was quite tired. I'll sleep in the back of the van. You know, I got a sleeping bag. I can sleep in a moving vehicle. The van stopped along the way, and I thought, oh, we're going to get diesel, we're going to get petrol or something. I'm half asleep, I'm half awake, and the sliding door on the back of the Renault slides open, and then there's an AK in my face. And I was like, I've never had a gun pointed to me in my life. Actually, maybe once with the police. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't think so. But
Right. But at the time, it felt like a first.
oh yes. And he was a big man, you know, with like hands the size of shovels, and a big ginger beard, and you know, I've never been a fan of ginger beards. But I was in my sleeping bag, and I looked and I said, I'm just gonna. And he's like, okay. So I'm going to get out of my sleeping bag very, very slowly as possible. Yeah. And I point to my boots, and I was like, and he's like, and I was like, what is happening? I get out of the vehicle. We've been pulled over at a checkpoint. They've got these block posts everywhere. The car in front of us, we were traveling with a little car, a beat up piece of shit van, and everybody was pulled out. The car people on the one side, and the 3 guys in the van. They put us up, hands up, on the van.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, I don't want to turn my head back too far, but I'm quite curious what's going on behind me. And there's these 3-4 soldiers like in mismatching uniforms and everything. And then they cock their bolts on their rifles. And I'm watching, and I'm a little bit scared, if I'm honest with you.
Only a little bit.
Yeah.
I think you had justification for being more than a little.
But I'm really curious. I don't want to turn my head all the way because
Yes.
I want to be as compliant as possible. But I want to see out of my periphery. And one of the guys is shaking a lot. He's shaking, and I'm thinking, you've got total advantage here. We are no threat. I don't know what happened. But they took our passports, they took our ID, they got us away from the vehicle, keeping both vehicles parties separate. And after a while, they let us put our hands down. They had the gun had lowered. I said, you know what, I'm going to have a cigarette now. By the way, I decided to start smoking after 10 years, my first day in Ukraine. So I was well into the habit by then. We're not quite 2 weeks into the war, and I said, I'm going to have a cigarette. And the guy beside me, don't you dare. I said, you're not my father. I can do whatever I want. They'll tell me what I can and cannot do. What it turned out to be, our guide in the front vehicle was a Ukrainian girl. She had a Russian stamp in her passport. Yeah. So we all get taken to jail. Okay, they've got enough cops there. They take our vehicles. But it's not a police station. It's a hotel. See, the police had moved out of the police stations because of missile attacks and all these sort of things.
Right.
So it's a hotel. Not a nice hotel, but nicer than a police station. I don't know what's going to happen. They've taken our phones, they've taken our passports, they've taken everything. I don't have social media. Remember that? I didn't have social media the first couple of months of the war. The police, this is, I don't know if I'd say this, but yeah, okay, tell the truth. I did have on my phone at the time Tinder.
Right.
Okay, things weren't great at home at the time, don't judge me. All the other boys were getting Tinder and just swiping all the time at the secret place and everywhere.
Right.
So I just thought, I'd swipe on beautiful girls and when I'm bored, I have no social media, I have nothing on my phone. One police officer speaks English, and I'm the only one without social media in this modern day. And the police started accusing me of being sex tourist. You're a sex tourist. I'm like, I was quite embarrassed because I didn't have any sexual inclinations to coming to Ukraine.
I think you would have picked somewhere else, wouldn't you, to be a sex tourist?
I would think Thailand or something.
Yeah, much more convenient.
Yeah. Although I could understand maybe pre-war time, maybe Ukraine might be the place for this sort of thing. Maybe, like beautiful women, whatever, and what have you. But no, I was not a sex tourist. We were held for about 3-4 hours, and one of the Canadian boys he went through the whole hysteria, manic depression, of being friendly with the police to crying. I was the first one to get my telephone back through all the interviews, and I rang this man Paul in Lviv. Now I do understand leadership principles from the army. He said, "Where are you? I'm trying to get a hold of you." I said, "Paul, please listen to me very carefully. Everybody is okay. Everybody is okay, but we've all been arrested. I believe we're all going to be freed because I've just finished and I've got my telephone. So I think everything's going to be okay. I can't talk now. I'll ring you later to let you know." And I thought that would be okay. It's like, "You need to tell me now." Paul, I have to go, "Fuck you." I was like, whoa, this is not the leadership I'm expecting. I'm telling you, you're the leader of us all, that everybody's had a problem, but we're all okay. I'll update you later. Yeah, the long and the short of it, a couple of us became quite disenchanted with this humanitarian work. As soon as I got back to Lviv, I contacted the Swedes, the Swedish guys who went to Kyiv to join Hospitalers, whatever the hell that was. And I asked them, I said, I think I'd like to take a chance. I'd like to maybe try to join the Hospitalers with you. And they said, well, let us talk to someone here. We've got Oleg. I was like, who's Oleg? There's a lot of Olegs in Ukraine.
Several, I've been told.
Yeah. They called me back the next day and they said, how soon can you get here? I said, well, maybe a day or two. I think I can take a train. And they said, okay, we'll come. And I'm back at the secret place. And at the secret place, there's some of the same people that have been there. They're just sitting in Lviv and they're doing something. They're going to go do something. They've not done anything. They don't know what to do. And I kind of felt like the secret place was maybe not the place to be. Do you know that it was kind of like purgatory?
Right, and not always full of people with the highest of initiative.
Not the highest of initiative. A lot of storytellers, characters.
A lot of swiping right.
A lot of swipe. Yeah, there was a lot of swiping going on there back in those days. No, what I decided to do, I booked a train ticket, an overnight, all day train to Kyiv, and I was terrified. I was terrified because, to me, I thought Kyiv would be like Stalingrad.
So the trains were still running as normal to where the fighting was happening, because I would have thought that with modern munitions, taking out a railway line would have been reasonably easy.
I thought that too, do you know? And I'm very grateful we're fighting Russia and not America. No insult, not to. The Russians have caused a lot of damage there, but there's some things that the Russians never seem to do in the war that I would have thought, why don't they just blow up all the bridges? Why don't they blow up all the railways and then they can... But anyway, I'm on a train, and I'm on a train that's a big moving target, and I'm traveling during the day, and I'm looking out the windows, and I seen which looked like an oil derrick on fire. The thick black smoke like in Kuwait.
Yes,
from the films?
Yes, well remember that.
Yeah. I seen things like that, and I said, couldn't tell you where that was.
Are you on a largely empty train? Are you on a train full of soldiers?
The train is probably half full of civilians, or maybe a third full.
Of people going to
Kyiv,
right.
And maybe a stop in between, like Rivne or somewhere that is somewhere on the map. I didn't know it, so how is this going to work? So I was on there for quite a few hours. It couldn't go directly its normal route to Kyiv. They had to divert apparently and come from the south. But when I arrived there, everything was pitch black. There was no lights, there was no street lights. Even getting off the train, because it's not like trains here in Britain. The platform, there's a bit more of a gap in the dark. And the fall seems to be just that much more a consequence.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're wearing a Bergen.
And I'm wearing a Bergen, and health and safety didn't really seem to be a concern there, like in the modern Western world. But the thing was, I found out we couldn't leave the train station. Kyiv had a curfew, had a martial law. And I don't know who explained it to me, but some person spoke English. The authorities did not. I was told by this man, we have to stay here tonight. You can't leave until I think 5 or 6 in the morning. Then the curfew's over. He says, but come with me. If you come upstairs, I think he'd done this run a couple times before. It's nicer to sleep up there on that floor. I said, okay, well that's I'll follow you. And he said, well, along the way, come with me here, because there's these old babushkas who they've got soup and coffee and they'll feed you. And I said, this is nice. Yeah. But all night I'm paranoid. Is somebody going to rob me? Someone going to steal my Bergen? I didn't sleep too well. And there was air raid sirens and this sort. But I knew the next morning I had a location I had to get to, and surprisingly enough, I've got a Ukrainian SIM card. The phone service is working perfectly fine. And I thought I'd go for a walk in the morning, and I'd walk to I'd walk to where I was supposed to go, to where supposedly where our base was. But this nice chap who I slept beside the night before, who was so helpful, he was walking with me, and he was following me, or supposedly on the same way. But I was scared in my head. I need to get rid of him. I can't go to where I'm going because he could be a Russian spy. See, this was a big thing early in the war. I don't know the difference between a Ukrainian or a Russian. I got rid of that fella, and I had to go wait on a park bench somewhere. That's where the location I was given. And Oleg would come along to collect me. Yeah, Oleg. I don't know who Oleg is, but probably I got out of the airport around 6 in the morning, probably around 10 in the morning. Oleg came with one of the Swedish boys. And
that's reassuring.
Yes. And I gave him a big hug, you know, like, and Oleg was like, "Hi." And I was like, "Okay, you know, that's fair. That's fair." They said, yeah, we can get you in. They're not taking people right now, but they'll take you because we're on a team. And I'm walking in to where our base was. It's actually quite a prominent church in Kyiv, like a monastery.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. And
right, as soon as you say that,
Yeah.
I think are you telling the enemy now something that it would like to know? Is that not potentially a secret thing?
I'm sure maybe about 10, 12 months ago they would have liked to know that.
Right.
But I try not to get too hung up on that because I just... there's a lot of things in Ukraine that are on the TV, on the internet, that don't make sense to me. I try to apply my own common sense. But that it's well documented that monastery was our base at one time.
Okay.
Yeah. It's So it's quite bizarre going through the gates of this Eastern European church with a golden dome and you know, these fantastic colors of blue, and then the priests who walk around with those big hats like, and then seeing soldiers everywhere. But Oleg stops me before we go in. He's like, "What is your role?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "What will you do here?" And I thought, well, you know, medical battalion. I could be an ambulance driver. You know, I used to drive transit, sprinters, that sort. He said, no. We do not have any drivers. Would you like to be a gunner? We have some gunner positions that have come available. And I'm like, okay.
Become available is quite a sinister phrase in that context, isn't it?
I didn't inquire.
Right.
Didn't inquire. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But my friend Nico, who was one of the Swedish boys, he said to me, "Oh, hey, bro, I'm a gunner too. Cool." And I'm like, he'd already been in... He'd been in Kyiv, which I later learned about, like the Buchas, the airplanes. He'd been back and forth between all of this stuff.
Right.
"Oh, you're going to be a gunner too? Cool, bro." I was like, yeah, okay. It was a big, for me, a big part of the fear was dispelled because my friends I came with had done already what I was going to do.
Right.
And they were still alive. So that was half my fear gone. But when I got there, you know, they said, "Yeah, come with me. We'll get you into a room, and we're going into like this side building on the church. Yeah, come on up the stairs." And they had all these rooms in the church with bunk beds. Some of them were not even just 2 bunk beds; they were 3 bunk beds high. Okay, I was like, okay, this is my new home. They're like, "Yep, leave your bags here. You can stay with us. You don't want to stay down there and where they mix all the riffraff." Oh, okay. And I thought right away, I said, "We've got nothing for you now, but just wait." And I was very compliant. But then I thought, you know, maybe I'll go outside to where everyone's smoking, you know, and I'll smoke, I'll listen, I'll observe. There's always people smoking in Ukraine, just like any army, really. Yeah. What else are you going to do? And there's bombs going off in the distance. I didn't know how far they could be, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers. But there's all these Ukrainians, "Nahui bled, suga bled." But then I'd hear the English voices off to the side. So maybe I'd, you know, edge more over there. And it's like, "Oh, that's an American, that's British. Oh, that's a South African. Oh, that's a some sort of European. And I would listen, and I would talk to some of them, but I would try to listen more, because I remember the secret place and all the characters there and what they would say and what they would do. I don't want to use the word sizing them up, but I was just basically trying to figure out who was full of shit or not. Yeah. So I'll just watch, I'll listen. My Swedish friends were quite busy. They were on an ambulance crew. So there would be a driver, there would be a doctor, paramedic, a gunner, and they would drive basically like sprinter vans, transit vans painted green, you know, and they would go to Bucha, to Irpin for 2-3 days, and then the ambulance would come back to resupply, but to wash it out. Some of them had holes in them, like the Ukrainians point, see what happened to that one, he's all right. But to me, this was, what's happening here? But it was a big reassurance that my friends were going there and coming back. And one of the Swedes we came with, I'd never seen him at all. Apparently, he was trapped somewhere for about, I think, 8-9 days. So it's like, wow, he must really be in the shit. This was a very interesting place. There'd been foreigners there for a couple of weeks now, joining this Hospitallers medical battalion. I think before the war, because our battalion had been around since 2014, helping in the Donbass in the old war, helping army medical units, volunteer ambulance crews. They had less than 100 members prior to the full-scale invasion. And now, just in our base alone, there had to be over 200 people. 300, and we had people elsewhere in the country. So as quick as they could get a vehicle in, I'm just watching this over days. We had a little cafeteria in a basement, and they would get like a yellow van, a white van, and then it would go off a couple hours later, and it would come back green. It was all very fast. I would spend a lot of time in my room, but I would just try to help with boxes, move boxes. It wasn't like the British Army, the American Army, like, right, you're doing this, you're doing... Nobody would talk to you. So I just tried to get to know some of the Ukrainians that could speak English. What they started doing, they had a room in the basement where they were teaching in Ukrainian. They were teaching medical skills, teaching things that I only know about now. Tactical medicine with the tourniquets, how to stop bleeding, how to control airways issues, like basic paramedic skills.
Right.
But there was no training for foreigners. So I would sit in these Ukrainian classes. Eventually, more people started coming. We probably had about 40 foreigners at the time from all over the world. But this really good-looking nurse shows up from an American nurse, and right away all the guys start looking at her and everything, and she made a few comments. It's like, yeah, I've just spent the last 2 weeks with 200 guys, so I've seen it all and I'm not up for it. And I thought, right, she's no nonsense, let's not give her a hard time. She was a trauma nurse from Colorado. And over the next few days, she started forming a training program, the same as the Ukrainians were being trained, but for an English language syllabus.
Right.
Yeah, so I said, right, I need to get involved with this, because I'm going to be in a medical battalion, and nobody's asking me to do anything, so I should learn to do things. And she's like, right, we're going to do this for training, we're going to learn this, we're going to learn that. And the next day, someone says, oh, we're going to learn IVs. Like sticking a needle in your arm. Yeah. And I was like, ooh. There was this old man, 55, was old, I guess. And he spoke English, so I talked to him and I said, yeah, we're going to learn this tomorrow. I've never done that before. And he's sitting by this table here, and he just happens to grab a catheter. He's like, would you like to try? He just hands me his arm. I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know. He's like, you will learn. And I was like, oh my God. So I basically, with this man, he had a few catheters there, and he showed me the basics. He's like, right, you need to tie a little tourniquet around the arm.
Yeah.
You need to search for the veins, you feel it. got to take an alcohol swab, wipe it down. He's like, all right, now try. And I was like, well, but how? He's like, oh, just like this. I think with about 5 catheters over the next 20 minutes, I massacred the man's arm. But I was scared to do it, you know, like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. He's like, no, you have to push.
Right.
And
take a run up.
Yeah. And it's like, and when you're in, you're not quite in, so you need to push more. And I felt like I was a bit of an asshole. Bit of, you know, making this man's arm bleed everywhere. The training continued with different groups of foreigners, either native English speakers, non-English speakers, for about 10 days. Rebecca, the trainer, this hot American nurse,
right.
She said when we did a more formal class with the IVs, she said, now you're going to take my arm and do it. Well, I think I did okay, but I didn't occlude what we call put the proper pressure down when I inserted it, and her blood went flying everywhere because of a quite big gauge needle. I just massacred this woman's arm, but something about her being a woman, I got sick in my stomach.
Right.
Yeah. What I'd like to say while all this training's going on, they didn't know what to do with all the foreigners, the influx of foreigners. As the vehicles were coming, they would obviously have to find at least one Ukrainian that spoke English, you know, to make the teams. So it became real apparent to us that not all of us were ever going to get on a team, right? And a couple of days later, an American boy showed up, tall, good looking, you know, big arms, and he shows up to sleep in my bedroom, like at night, to have a bunk in there. And I'm just lying there on my bed, and he comes up, he's like, how you doing? I'm Trent. I'm from Utah. It's like this. And I looked at his arms like this. Yeah, I'm here to serve in the war. Hey, do you know where a fella could get a reach around here in Kyiv? And I was like,
that's his opening question.
That's his opening question. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, he's a little bit bizarre. He's like, yeah, I've done this. I've been there. I'm pretty high speed, low drag. And
right.
I was like,
Is this the recognised sign language for a bullshitting soldier?
yeah, pretty much. They're usually Americans, but I just always like this.
I've noticed you've adopted that a number of times.
Yeah. So he's quite a character, you know. What happens over the next few days, he's always, we called him Captain America. You know? And Ukrainians would be asking him, who speak some English, what did you do? And he's like, oh, I was a 3B or whatever, like some American call sign designation.
Right.
I didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't know what he was talking about. I started to think maybe he's a bit full of shit. So they wanted to vet the foreigners one day while the training's going on. And I'll never forget this till the day I die. I went before him. We had to go through an interview. And what there was a Ukrainian girl at a desk with a laptop, you know, doing her spreadsheets, whatever. But then there was this American guy who maybe was actual special forces one day, maybe. And then there was a British guy, normal lad from Yorkshire, actually, Paul Whittle, nice man. He was in the Dragoons back in the day. I said, you know. So I had to go for an interview, and my biggest thing was I never wanted to lie. So I said to them, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell the truth. The first question from the American Special Forces guy was, what did you do before the war? And I was like, I built kitchens for IKEA. And they all look at each other like, yeah. It's like, any military experience? I said, yeah, I was in the army quite some years ago in the Black Watch, but no combat experience. I'm like, oh, and the British guy's like, the Black Watch was a good regiment. And then I started getting a bit of confidence. I was like, the Black Watch is a good regiment. And any combat? I said, no, I did a brief stint in Northern Ireland, very brief. And the American's like, Northern Ireland, what's that? I was like, oh, it's like Bosnia 2000 when I was there. Not a shot fired. And he's like, okay. So what do you want to do here? It's like, well, I just want to help any way I can. Any role. I was thinking as the driver, but they don't want me as a driver. Okay. Do you want to go to the front? I said, well, I'll go wherever you need me. my biggest thing is I don't want to let anybody down. I just want to do the best I can. And then I go, okay, so you have no problem going to the front if that's where you need me. And they're like, okay, welcome on board. We'll get you a team in the next couple of days. I was like, this is good, you know, this is good. I was actually quite, I've always had self-esteem problems my whole life, but I was like, I told the truth, I told my intentions, and they're like, we'd love to have you. But I wanted to be a fly on the wall because Captain America was right behind me.
Right. Having to turn sideways, presumably, to get through the door.
Kind of, you know what I mean, like the coat hanger sort of thing, you know. But he did have quite a nice physique, you know. I won't take that away from him. So I went and sat right back down again, and there was him. And then the next question: what did you do before the war? So I was like, I was in 5th Group Special Forces, trained with 10th Mountain Division, been to Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and I was with the GR 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I also did with the 4, 3, 2, 1. And they're like, right, and this is even the American, and then, well, we don't have a position for you now, but if you help them load the boxes, we'll let you know. And I was like, see how the world works. You know, I really took something away from that. Within the next few days, I got my team, and what happened, I'm trying to do as much training, I'm trying to do as best I can, but I'm getting a little bit bored of the camp, right? And apparently, I don't drink, but there's a bar that's open. Now, from the church, St. Michael's Church, it's no secret where we were based.
Okay.
If you walk down the road, there's the Intercontinental Hotel. And that is a very big prominent hotel where your NBC, your CBC, your BBC, everyone's staying, the Red Cross is staying, all these big wigs. And just down the road from there, there's a place called Buena Vista. It's a cafe on the top, but down the basement, it's a pub. And it's kind of got like that speakeasy feel, because you go down to the basement, there's prohibition in Ukraine, okay, and there's a curfew. Now, they do not violate curfew, but prohibition, who's that hurting? And I would go at the end of the day's training, 2-3 days I went with my friends after the training. And I would be quiet, you know, just keep to myself with my friends and just enjoy an atmosphere that's not work. Yeah. But it's all full of foreigners and all these journalists. And I don't know, like, maybe it's like an expat hub of some sort. Like, it kind of had like a Saigon feel in my imagination.
Oh, right. Yep.
I don't know why, but you'd hear people in the background, and they'd be like, "Yeah, when I was in Bucha and Irpin, we seen this, and I did this, but don't quote me on that." And it seemed like it was utter bullshit, you know, like coming out of these people, like 2-3 beer. One of our trainers, who he was talking to every journalist. He was an American man from California, I believe, a paramedic. Very good trainer, but he went on one rotation to Irpin and decided that shelling wasn't for him. So he was going to be a trainer. But every journalist, oh, come meet this person, that person. He knew that pub quite well. But the last time I ever went to the pub, there was me, there was an American boy who he always walked around with a knife and a grenade in his pocket. He had like cargo trousers, you know, like the hiking ones, like the North Face. And he just said, yeah, well, this is it, you know, we're not allowed to bring guns out into the city, but if the Russians come, they're never taking me. But other than that, he was quite sensible, surprisingly. Other than just the grenade and the Rambo knife. He was actually one of the most sensible people I ever met. There was me, there was him, and there was 3 of the Swedes, but not the 4th Swede we came with. He was back at the base. Everyone's having a pint, and I'm drinking like a Coke. One of the Swedish boys gets a phone call, and it's like, yes, what? And I'm like, you know, because we're in war, so when I think of a what, you know, it's not like a drama with your girlfriend. And he's like, he did what? Anyway, he hangs up the phone. He's like, Sten shot someone. I'm like, what? One of the other Swedes. I was like, what? It's like, everyone has to go back to base now. So naturally, the Swedes are just like good British boys. Glug, 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 glug. Finish that pint. And the next one that was the order. They were all double parking at the time, you know,
Right,
with their pints. Everybody slammed their pint.
Well, waste is a terrible thing.
Yeah. This is the thing, and we're only talking like an extra minute, you know.
Okay.
We all ran back to the base, and see, our battalion's policy is not to issue people with weapons.
Right.
But in Ukraine, Ukrainians can buy weapons. They can do it, and what you do with a weapon, because we're a medical battalion. Some medics have, some medics don't have weapons. But what had happened over the previous week, 2 weeks, I'm told there'd been 8 in our building NDs, negligent discharges. Okay.
Right, yes.
So these are Ukrainians who they own a gun, they might know how to use a gun, or their uncle had given them a gun, from AKs to Makarov pistols to they're in the barracks, like, boom! You know, I heard one of them before. But apparently now this Swedish Marine medic who had 12 years in the army, out of all people, we were all lined up on a line, but where is he? Well, he shot someone, that's what we're told. And first thing, Nemo, he's like our second in command, Sergeant Major. He's quite a big man, you know, speaks very good English, thank God. And in Ukrainian, he's yelling to everyone on base that's all on the line. And then in English, everybody will hand their weapons in. And then he comes by to the American guy who always wants to remain anonymous. And he looks at him, and grenades. And he's like, oh. What happened, the Swede had a Sushka. That's like the mini AK, you know, the little short AK.
Right, yes.
And somebody, it wasn't his, but somebody gave it to him, and he was clearing the weapon. You know, take the magazine off, pull the bolt back, clear the round out. The round did not clear properly, and when it went forward and he pulled the trigger to clear it, the round came out, but he didn't have the weapon pointed towards the sandbag. So it hit the concrete, the round ricocheted and hit another person. But it wasn't just anybody. It was our commanding officer's father. Yeah.
But not fatally, Catherine.
It entered about here, below the elbow, and it came out his shoulder.
Yikes.
Later on, he does have diminished capacity of the use of his arm.
Yeah.
But this isn't shooting another soldier. You know, you've heard about a blue on blue. This is the CO's dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not really a good strike for the foreigners, or I'm nominally part of the Swedes. But anyway, nothing was really said about that. Apparently, accidents can happen in Ukraine. So he's gone on to do weird and wonderful things. But he's shot the commanding officer's dad in his second week in Ukraine, third week. Yeah, not great, eh?
No. So we have to get you from where you are now in the story to eventually they send you somewhere to do a thing.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. It was always a big fear. Am I going to get made onto a team? Am I not going to get made onto a team? And right around the time, pretty much about a day after, the CO's dad got shot, I got made onto a team. Our commander was a Ukrainian girl, a paramedic. She was about 28. She'd apparently been wounded in the old war in Donbass.
Right.
And she'd come back for the full-scale invasion. There was her boyfriend, who was a driver, and he was kind of a big heavyset boy with a Beatles haircut. Like a George Harrison. He was to be the driver. There was Dima, who was an anesthesiologist student from Kharkiv, who had to leave because Kharkiv was Kharkiv, and a French doctor named Edouard. So, and him and Rebecca had taught the whole program to us. That was it. That was our team made, ready to go. We got an ambulance. We cleaned the ambulance. We seen, this is how the gurney goes in and out. This is how we get our supplies.
Right.
The Battle of Kyiv was essentially pretty much over right at that point. So now all the teams going from Bucha to Irpin to everywhere, now you're going to go to Donbass. Now you're going to go to Zaporizhia. Now you're going to go to Mykolaiv. So we didn't know where we were going to go. And we got a notice that you're going to the Zaporizhia front. I said, okay, well that's that. And you're going to leave tomorrow. But this is something I'll never forget with my commanding officer. She delayed it for 2 days because of Dima. Dima's from Kharkiv. And he went to our commander, said, can I have a delayed rotation? Why? Well, my grandmother's house has been blowing up, and she's gone to live in a shelter in Kharkiv, and that shelter's been blowing up, so now she's somewhere else. I'm really concerned about my grandmother. Yana Zinkovic, she's a woman, she's our commander. She's in a wheelchair, by the way. She's a very strong woman. She delayed our rotation. She said, well, you're an anesthesiologist. It's a very important doctor. He said, I need you to be focused. You and you can take one other person. And she gave money and funds. Go get your grandmother. Get to Kharkiv as quick as you can. Get your grandmother, bring her back here, and we'll arrange accommodation for her. And then you can go to work. I don't know any army in the world that do that. Dima went, and then of course we were delayed a couple of days, and now you know, I went on my first rotation to the war, to the actual war.
Right. Well, we'll find out about that in the next video. Thank you so much for coming in.
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.